Addiction. Addiction. Addiction is a brain disorder characterized by compulsive engagement in rewarding stimuli despite adverse consequences. Despite the involvement of a number of psychosocial factors, a biological process, one which is induced by repeated exposure to an addictive stimulus, is the core pathology that drives the development and maintenance of an addiction. The two properties that characterize all addictive stimuli are that they are reinforcing, for example, they increase the likelihood that a person will seek repeated exposure to them, and intrinsically rewarding, for example, they are perceived as being inherently positive, desirable, and pleasurable. Addiction is a disorder of the brain's reward system which arises through transcriptional and epigenetic mechanisms and develops over time from chronically high levels of exposure to an addictive stimulus. For example, eating food, the use of cocaine, engagement in sexual activity, participation in high thrill cultural activities such as gambling, etc. Read more about addiction, a critical component and common factor in the development of virtually all forms of behavioral and drug addictions. 2 decades of research into role in addiction that demonstrates that addiction arises and the associated compulsive behavior identifies or attenuates along with the overexpression of read all about it. Addiction exacts an astoundingly high financial and human toll on individuals and society as a whole. In the US, the total economic cost to society is greater than that of all types of diabetes and all cancers combined. These costs arise from the direct adverse effects of drugs and associated healthcare costs. For example, emergency medical services, outpatient and inpatient care, long-term complications, lung cancer from smoking tobacco products, liver cirrhosis and dementia from chronic alcohol consumption, and meth mouth from methamphetamine use. The loss of productivity and associated welfare costs, fatal and non-fatal accidents, for example, traffic collisions, suicides, homicides, and incarceration, among others. Classic hallmarks of addiction include impaired control over substances or behavior, preoccupation with substance or behavior, and continued use despite consequences. Habits and patterns associated with addiction are typically categorized by immediate gratification, short-term reward, coupled with delayed deleterious effects, long-term costs. Examples of drug and behavioral addictions include alcoholism, marijuana addiction, methamphetamine addiction, cocaine addiction, nicotine addiction, opioid addiction, food addiction, video game addiction, gambling addiction, and sexual addiction. The only behavioral addiction recognized by the DSM-5 and the ICD-10 is gambling addiction. The term addiction is misused frequently to refer to the other compulsive behaviors or disorders, particularly dependence, in news media. An important distinction between drug addiction and dependence is that drug dependence is a disorder in which cessation of the drug use results in an unpleasant state of withdrawal, which can lead to further drug use. Addiction is the compulsive use of a substance or the performance of a behavior that is independent of withdrawal. Addiction can occur in the absence of dependence, and dependence can occur in the absence of addiction, although the two often occur together. Read about the neuropsychology, cognitive control, and stimulus control, which is associated with operant and classical conditioning, represent opposite processes, internal versus external or environmental respectively, that compete over the control of an individual's elicited behaviors. Cognitive control, and particularly inhibitory control over behavior, is impaired in both addiction and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Stimulus-driven behavioral responses that are associated with a particular rewarding stimulus tend to dominate one's behavior in an addiction. Read about stimulus-controlled behavior, cognitive controlled behavior, behavioral addiction, risk factors, genetic factors, environmental factors, age, comorbid disorders, epigenetic factors, transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, mechanisms, transcription factor glossary such as gene expression, transcription factor, transcriptional regulation, upregulation, downregulation, coactivator, co-repressor, response element, chronic addictive drug use causes alterations in gene expression. Read about the reward system, the prefrontal cortex, role of dopamine and glutamate, reward sensitization, neuroepigenetic mechanisms, diagnosis, treatment, behavioral therapy, medication, alcohol addiction, behavioral addictions, cannabinoid addiction, nicotine addiction, opioid addiction, psychostimulant addiction, epidemiology in Asia, Australia, Europe, US, South America, personality theories. Read all about addiction, addiction, addiction.